Sunday School teacher, I'm glad that you've joined us for our time of study and preparation. We continue in our study of the book of Galatians. We're looking at the Bible study for Sunday, September the 9th. The title of this lesson is True Grace. We move to Galatians chapter 2, where we'll be. We're going to be looking at 10 verses, verse 11 through 21. The point of the lesson, what we want to accomplish in the lives of those people who are in our class, is that we want them to understand that true grace is no respecter of persons. And so we're going to be looking at the incident of where Paul and Peter had their encounter about some things that Peter had done that offended Paul. As we think about this lesson entitled True Grace, a couple of things we need to make sure that we understand as introduction and background. Number one is that God gives because it is His character to give. The reason that we are given eternal life, the reason that we are given forgiveness is because God is a giver. That is His nature. He loves to give. Number two, the greatest gift that He offers is the gift of a relationship with Him through faith in Jesus Christ. That's the greatest gift that He gives us. We receive lots of gifts every day from God, but the greatest gift that we have is our salvation. And I hope you look at everything as a gift from God. Your family, your job, all that you have, your health, as a gift from God. Number three, Jesus gave His life sacrificially to make salvation available. And so He did so of His free will, and He did so to sacrifice Himself for us. And then finally, Paul's apostleship was being questioned, as we mentioned last week, as well as the message that he preached. So Paul was not only under attack as an apostle, but also the message that he preached, salvation through Christ alone, was being attacked. And so Paul writes Galatians to counter those attacks. So let's look at these verses. We're going to look at verses 11 through 14, and there we see confronted by truth. Verse 11, but when Cephas, that's Peter, came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For he regularly ate with the Gentiles before certain men came from James. However, when they came, he withdrew and separated himself because he feared those of the circumcision party. And then verse 13, then the rest of the Jews joined his hypocrisy, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. But when I saw that they were deviating from the truth of the gospel, I told Cephas in front of everyone, if you who are a Jew live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you compel Gentiles to live like Jews? So here we have that encounter. Antioch was a significant city in the Roman Empire, and it was also very important to the spread of the Christian faith. The Jerusalem church had confirmed the message of grace, grace alone, and they had sent Paul to preach and to teach in Antioch. Remember, Barnabas went and got Paul and taught there in Antioch. Peter came to visit in Antioch. following the Jerusalem council, and Paul confronted him because of his actions. And that's what we see in verse 11, that encounter that they had. The charge that Paul brought was that he initially fellowshipped with his new Gentile brothers, but when other men came from Jerusalem, he refused to meet with the Gentiles. So you get the picture in verse 12. Peter comes to town. You've got Gentile Christians. Peter's having meals with them, eating their food, doing what they do in their culture. But when others from Jerusalem arrive and they begin to say, how can Gentiles be saved? And the old argument that they had at the Jerusalem Council, Peter backs up. And he says, well, I'm not, this is causing me too much problem. And so Paul confronts him about that. The men from Jerusalem arrived, and they pressured Peter to back away from the table of fellowship with other Gentile believers. And then verse 13, Paul uses the word hypocrisy, that Peter's hypocrisy had a devastating ripple effect, and that's what we see in verse 13. It says, the rest of the Jews, these were the other Christian leaders in the church, and they were there, and they were persuaded by Peter and the decision that he made. And then Paul says it was so bad that even Barnabas was swept away in the conflict. And this is important because Barnabas was, if it were not for Barnabas and what Barnabas did for Paul, Barnabas was his mentor. And here Paul is having to stand up